Hey everybody, it's Dave Dugdale, learningvideo.com. I own this Sony RX100 V, which has a 24-70 lens. I wanted to try something new with a bit more reach, and the RX100 VII can reach all the way out to 200 millimeters. When shooting crew from another boat, I believe they called it a launch, I need a gimbal most of the time because if the water's not perfectly smooth, I'm just going to have a lot of shots that I can't use. They'll be just very unstable, and with rolling shutter, it's just not going to be very pretty. Now, if there is a way out there to shoot with a full frame camera or even a crop sensor camera at 200 millimeter on a gimbal, definitely let me know. I couldn't figure out a way to do that because at 200 millimeters, when you're on a launch boat, which is where the coaches usually sit, 200 millimeters will give me a way to isolate the rowers. So I'm not seeing the entire boat, but I'm seeing individual rowers, and I can get a steady shot out of it. If the crew practice is about 2 hours, I have no problem holding the Zhiyun Crane M and the Sony RX100 VII the entire time. It's that lightweight of a setup. But I don't really have to because the batteries on the Sony will run out about an hour if you're shooting 4K. And I'll have to end up changing batteries. A couple of things I really like about the Zhiyun Crane and the Sony combination is I can connect the cable up to the two of them, and I can use the zoom function from the handle of the gimbal, and also I can hit start and stop video recording as well, which just makes that fantastic without having to touch the camera at all on the gimbal. Shooting 4K on this camera is really nice. It gives you really nice detailed images. This camera has a really nice sharp lens. However, when you do shoot 4K, even with the Mark VII, the screen will dim from full brightness to normal brightness, so it's really challenging to see the screen, especially when you're holding it upside down, inches above the water, or out in direct sunlight. The RX100 Mark V, the older one that I own, has a built-in ND filter, which is very handy because you can't get above f11 on this camera. But they had to take the ND filter out on the Mark VII to make room for a larger lens. If you try to shoot 4K, 24 frames per second, or even 30 frames per second in an outdoor setting, normally it's just too bright, as you can see here. The only thing I could really do was raise the shutter speed from a 50th of a second to somewhere in the range of 100 to 200th of a second. And that's a bit too noticeable for a sport like rowing. If I had 4K 60 on this camera, I wouldn't really need an ND filter because I would be shooting the shutter speed up around 125th. Perhaps in the next model it'll have this, I'm not sure. Being up around 125th shutter will put me in that range between 100 and 200 of a second range that I'm shooting with currently, and I wouldn't really need an ND filter. Now I know you can buy ND filters for this camera, but I haven't tried any yet. I just couldn't get any in for this review. They look like they're a pain in the butt to put on, however. Right now as it stands, I really like this camera. I like having the reach of 200 millimeters. However, I'm gonna guess I'm gonna wait for the next version, which hopefully will have 4K 60 and the same lens. And I think that will be a killer package for shooting a sport like this, where you're trying to shoot on a gimbal for a long period of time without getting your arm tired. Again, if anybody knows of a 200 millimeter full frame or crop combination that's not a bridge camera but an interchangeable lens camera and a gimbal, definitely put it in the comments down below. The reason I'd like to shoot with a full frame camera is for shots like this, which has a shallow depth of field, has a very nice feel to it. And this was shot on extremely smooth water, but extremely smooth water on the reservoir that we have is pretty rare. All right, that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.